Okay. Yes, we are there. So, welcome to the third and last day of Making Matters number 2, collective material practices in critical times or even catastrophic times. Yesterday we said that we are getting more explanations and practical examples of what it actually means to have collective practices in these times and what these collective material practices could be. We're continuing this quest and this investigation with Zhangjiao Cha, Display Distribute from Hong Kong, with Ms. PAPERBRIDGEE and Ms. Portable, who will be here and turn on the cameras, hopefully, very soon. Now, let me introduce Display Distribute. The Display Distribute describes itself as a now and again exhibition space, distribution service, thematic inquiry, and sometimes shop in Kowloon, Hong Kong. Its activities involve subversive shopping experiences, disturbing distribution, shadow research, and endless garment. So we will see what this means in the presentation. They're working in and from Hong Kong and the Pearl River Delta, where they do, as they say, collaborative research projects in low-end globalization networks forms of production. So maybe that becomes less abstract and more concrete when we are looking at sub-projects of Display Distribute, such as light logistics. I won't give away too much, but it's a kind of courier system, and whose tickets and project descriptions you can read online on Display Distribute's websites. So it's acting as a parasite or parasiting both the publishing and logistical infrastructures that exist, and does poetic research and archival, and deals, also does this with a very strong feminist impetus. For example, running a peripatetic radio program of hidden feminist narratives known as Widow Radio Ching. So much for a very incomplete introduction of the activities of Display Distribute. I should shut up at this point and leave the stage and panel to the Display Distribute itself. Are you ready? We don't see you yet. Yeah, it's now your mic is on.
Okay. Hi, hello, PAPERBRIDGEEE. Hello, Mokin. Long time no see. First of all, I should say, welcome back to Hong Kong. Very happy that you've made it back safely and just out of quarantine in time for us to provide some news updates for our friends in the Netherlands.
Thank you, Portable. 真係好耐冇見. So glad there are transliterations like long time no see coming from the Cantonese language to help ease my transition back from the US. I guess we can also talk about ketchup.
Ketchup?
Or maybe shout out slogans to tell everyone to 買嚟睇買嚟揀 at the wet marketplace. Come see, come choose.
買嚟睇買嚟揀 買嚟揀 So pretty. Cheap. Pretty cheap. 買嚟睇買嚟揀 買嚟睇 come choose come buy.
So somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it.
Well, good election discussion. It's a crazy market out there, isn't it? But among other loanwords from Chinese, Did you know that the word brainwash actually comes from the literal translation from Chinese sai, wash, lo, brain?
Well, yes, I did know that, thank you. Of course, it is part of my duty as a carrier for light logistics to think about forms of transmission, both material and otherwise.
Ah, maybe you can explain a little bit more about what you mean by that? I mean, do you think our activities wash brains?
I don't mean brainwashing in the sinister sense that it is most understood today, but maybe something more like the Taoist face wash, which is really about building and storing qi in the body. The repetitive actions that we perform as carriers are actually to serve as containers, boxes, or packages for releasing and sharing qi. There is on the one hand knowledge in the form of the publication we carry, but what is equally crucial and yet harder to record comes by way of the relayed energies and effects from one-to-one encounters with all those we come into contact with.
Indeed. Our entire bodies are framed by skin. And by the way, your skin is looking especially glowing today, Miss PAPERBRIDGEEE.
Oh, thank you, Miss Portable.
Well, anyway, you know we come into contact with so much for every journey. We are touched by so many and pass through so many hands. But actually, this most recent journey of yours being a risky one in a time of pandemic, did you feel that social distancing affected the touch required to get you from New York back to Hong Kong?
Dispatch HKL 365 was actually quite smooth. I picked up the dispatch the day before leaving New York from the maker of one of the publications, Fei Liu. She had prepared a new edition of the Pepe the Sad Frog coloring book and Chinese language guide, which documents the genealogy of the Pepe meme from the US to China. And the new version includes the latest developments of how Pepe was overwhelmingly picked up by the anti-extradition protesters in Hong Kong last year as a mascot for the movement. So Display Distribute had ordered a few copies from her, and we also had a hanging dispatch from February of An Order of Ming, a scene about gender and Vietnamese diaspora identity from Melbourne. Because the maker had traveled to New York on a residency, the last copies were there. So Faye picked them up from her in March of this year, and Ming and Pepe had been waiting together to come back to Hong Kong without any outgoing carriers. The pandemic and the US were starting to wear on me. So finally, I arranged this last move to get out over the summer and offer my carrying services. Oh, and there's also one more book in HKL 365. A related publication called Memes to Movements, How the World's Most Vital Media is Changing Social Protest and Power. It's by a friend of Faye's, so I carried that as well to bring it back to a friend of the author in Hong Kong.
I'd like to read that one.
Anyhow, I tried to escape certain restrictions by flying through Canada. But since I have family in Vancouver, the layover was extended, and that's why this transition was particularly slow. Everything was fine though, and it wasn't until coming back to Hong Kong that things started to feel strange. I never had to do research on how to properly come back to home before, because now the entry procedure is so convoluted by testing and dubious registration procedures. I realized that my skin and my contents are getting recorded in ways that the authorities doesn't want you to know about.
What? You mean is something being whitewashed?
You could call it something like that. There were 2 booths for taking the saliva screening test at the airport, which was already strange. Especially because the second test was meant by people who sound more like mainland security personnel or National Guards than Hong Kong staff at the airport, honestly. There was nothing explained, making one assume that you would, for some reason, mandatorily have to go through the whole procedure and be tested twice. So for the first time ever coming back to my home city, I had to actually look up what the official procedure was to enter. And I found out that the second test is not compulsory. So I started asking the staff questions, and they sent me back to the waiting area without giving me answers, and repeatedly reiterating that I could still take the second test if I changed my mind.
Oh my god, wow. Yeah. There's been a lot of fear and controversy about mainland administered testing stations in Hong Kong. I mean, people say that they're recording Hong Kong citizens' DNA and other data and using them in the mainland. So many people, like myself actually, don't really want to get tested. That question of surveillance and data tracking is really difficult when it is hard for the average person to even begin to think about what kinds of data they're giving away and how it might be used. But having the so called sovereignty of one's own DNA taken away by safety protocols sparks obvious outcry, even more especially because of the political situation between Hong Kong and the mainland right now.
This is what Chinese leaders want to step up. Lawmakers behave bad. For those from the Democratic Party to make progress.
And some of the people that I've spoken to are all saying that there's a way to get a lot more works. And so I think we will fasten our seatbelt.
Fasten your seatbelt. Bless you, PAPERBRIDGEE.
Thank you.
Yeah, metadata is really the crucial component of logistical infrastructures. So actually, if you've purchased something online nowadays, we've really just come to the level of sophistication that we can and feel it's a right to know where our purchase is every step of the way. What this offers us as distanced consumers is the possibility to see at least a part of the global production process. But most of us do that completely uncritically. Like, for example, not realizing that the frozen Norwegian fish fillet we bought from the supermarket actually traveled first to China on a factory ship and was deboned by hand by a female worker because she does it more finely and more cheaply than a machine can. And then this lazy dinner of ours, it went to Korea because in South Korea, they have the world's largest cold food storage facilities, the size of football stadiums. And then this fish was auctioned off and it was re-imported back to wherever you are so that you have a nice box of authentic Norwegian salmon.
So actually, the rendering astray or weirdness of metadata is central to our entire project. As a carrier service, we're mimicking the movements and architectures of traditional logistic infrastructures, but working by the chance that happenstance travel from the very gray margin by which display distribute, our umbrella organization has been founded. We turn deliveries and drop-offs and handovers into another kind of encounter, and document them in whatever way each of us is willing to share and deem interesting, and tell other kinds of stories.
Yeah, we could call it a neo-psychogeography of sorts. Like, there's always a fixity of a journey from point A to point B to frame the geography, but where the observations and the insights and the inner stories deviate from the trajectory is where light logistics begins to reconsider the possibilities of the network.
Yes, and I always like to document my dispatches with Canto Chinglish, so the stories themselves become a kind of strange code, alienating even if you do speak both languages. There's always something that's being hidden at the same time that it's being reviewed.
Yeah. I can't even read your dispatch there. K sat gong hei.
K-sat. Gong hei.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess this kind of alienation, it's like our skins, which are a packaging of sorts. Like there's things hiding the content, but actually there are things being used. The package is being used for maybe other sorts of messaging.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, I remember a few dispatches where we were dressed in posters picked up from the demonstration last year. I'm not sure if it was a psychosensory transplant, but I really felt that some of them still had the stench of tear gas on them. And it was strange to think that I was smuggling tear gas across borders along with sometimes sensitive publications.
Well, we haven't dared to re-import those packages of Chinese tear gas back into the mainland. But yes, some of those paraphernalia have made it to the Middle East, to the US, and to Japan. Uh, Hong Kong, anyway, is all about pleading to the international community anyway. So, I mean, I guess this is our minor contribution.
Yeah, that's a highly problematic position. But it's our colonial history, and even if I don't agree with the ones waving the Union Jack or American flags, I still think we can work this in a way that can nurture our own transnational solidarities.
Yes, I mean that is what our publications are about too. We carry independent books and zines from and about East and Southeast Asia, and by encouraging dialogues between publishers, readers, and the couriers through the light logistics, I hope that we can support more ground up, egalitarian, and post anarchist forms of knowledge.
Ooh, so there's a propaganda at work.
Well, everything is propaganda, isn't it? I mean, even if there isn't a direct message, the contemporary imperative for followers seems to refer always to some kind of recruitment into whatever cults or gangs or tribes.
So, what is your message?
My message is my skin, but my contents are my service to other bodies next to my own. Or, as Lawrence Liang, Prashant Iyengar, and Jiti Nachani wrote in How Does an Asian Commons Mean? While the idea of the itinerant often refers to the movement of people, our claim is that the movement of people and the movement of culture can never be distinguished, and the itinerant and the iteration begin to merge. Where are you sending me?
Actually, we're not going to be moving very much for quite some time.
Yeah, you're right. Things are a bit stuck right now. I mean, you're actually one of only 3 or 4 cross-border dispatches that have made it this year. No one is traveling, so there isn't anyone able to volunteer to carry us since the pandemic.
Yeah, aren't there a couple of packages still in relay in the Netherlands, actually?
Yes, let me check. Dispatch HQL 364, I see. Currently stationed with courier Miss Amy S. Wu with a final destination of Hong Kong, but partially stuck in Rotterdam since my trip to the Netherlands for this conference was cancelled. Yes, and I see there's HQL 332 also in Rotterdam. It's still hanging in courier Miss Clara Balaguer's kitchen with a final destination of Utrecht.
All familiar names. Carrier Miss Balaguer is also a publisher, isn't she? We carry a few of the publications from her collective, Hardworking, Good Looking. Ew, it sounds like we're just using our own friend networks. But I guess that's why we haven't received major complaints because of the slowness.
Yeah, we're lucky we haven't been sued yet. But the conditions of slowness are built into our terms of service. So hopefully the curious are understanding. I mean, actually, the legal jargon of our terms and conditions was even copied and poetically appended as a business literature project. And yes, the project started by personally reaching out to people we hear are traveling, and it is still quite reliant upon camaraderie. So whether or not this network is a weakness is actually because it has to do with trust, which is something that also takes time. Even if writing and reading may be classically understood as very solitary affairs, they are always about a kind of community, which is why you hear Andre Breton's quote, "One publishes to find comrades," often repeated in independent publishing circles. It's a very do it with others effort, and it's because of camaraderie, the support of independent publishing, and a little bit of extra luggage space that Light Logistics is able to move. But it is most definitely not a closed circuit. And since we began in 2015, there have been many new couriers added to the network, including yourself. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the story of how you got to be a Light Logistics courier.
Yeah. I remember I first came across Display Distribute in 2016 when I was still based in Chicago. I was looking for methods where I can purchase Fengfo, a monthly scene published by a collective in Guangzhou, and it seemed like Display Distribute was the only place where I could get it online. And from there, I stumbled upon the logistics page and found this counter-urgency method of transporting parcels, which I was really curious about. And since I was a student at the time, I could always use my student ID to gain free extra luggage allowance when I traveled. So I thought, why not see who or what I can encounter with this?
Yes, I see your first dispatch was, let me see, HQL 204 from Chicago to Hong Kong. And then after that, you embarked upon HQL 223 from New York through Chicago back to Hong Kong again. 87 days, I see. And then HQL 243 from Hong Kong back to Chicago. Closing in on around about 2 months' time there. And then another one, HQL 293 from Chicago to Hong Kong. And actually this one is a special one. Maybe we can elaborate a little bit more about it. You were so kind, I see, to put the Parasite art space logo in your documentation. So let's take a little derive here and talk about the politics of logos. Another kind of propaganda, you could say. So in this instance, you were not actually carrying books, right?
Yeah, right. There were 7 framed artworks from the artist Andrew Norman Wilson. Which I picked up from his gallery in Chicago and brought it to Parasite for an exhibition in Hong Kong. Light Logistics was taking a foray into art transport.
Indeed. And actually, the whole story started with a logo from a company called G4S, based in the UK, I think. Yeah. So they are a multinational security services company, basically cops for hire, you could say. And that's why it was a bit strange for us when we saw their logo printed on the PR material of an exhibition held at their space in 2019. This was especially alarming because G4S has over the years been involved in a number of controversies, including their involvement with refugee detention centers around the world and reported incidents of unnecessary violence in prisons and even at the London Olympics. So after a bit of digging around from some of our cohorts, we found out that their multinational capacities have also enabled them to form a branch of logistical infrastructure. And I guess it's classy and convenient. They include a special service in art handling, which they offered to Parasite for free in exchange for publicity mentions. This was highly questionable to us, and in addition to collective letters to Parasite in dissent, there was the added irony of us being invited to participate in the following exhibition of the space. So we decided to incorporate our dissent as an infiltration of our artistic labor.
Yeah, we became the replacement art logistics service for the exhibition as our contribution to the show. We were lucky that I just happened to be traveling back to Hong Kong at the right time, and the works from Wilson made it back in a speedy 16 days.
Wow. Quite speedy.
Another carrier brought them back at the conclusion of the show, but I ended up picking them up again from her in New York for dispatch HQL 329 legs from New York to Chicago, so that took a bit longer.
I think the gallery, they didn't really even seem to mind. I mean, okay, 136 days to receive their artwork back. You told me, I remember you telling me they were remarkably laid back. I mean, they gave you the works just wrapped in foam and then put them in a plastic bag or something like this, right?
Yeah. And then after that, I ended up moving to New York, so I helped make a relay and connection for HQL 341, which was carried by a friend of mine back to Hong Kong.
So now we're all caught up back to HQL 365, which was just completed since you finished your quarantine just a couple of days ago. It's really quite a remarkable track record, and I really must say that you have done an incredible service to independent publishing, and you're really a model to packages all over the world. So, it is with great honor that I would also like to take this opportunity to present you with a modest award in appreciation for your contributions to light logistics and display distribute.
What is this?
Well, it's a container for a trophy, a tote bag. It also serves as its own message, right? Yeah.
Oh, I see.
You don't like it? But I mean, it's a limited edition tote bag. I mean, it's especially made in collaboration with Display Distribute and 女子天团 NZTT Sewing Co-op based in Guangzhou. We had collected free tote bags from various publicity events and reworked them with the propaganda about co-parenting and the dismantling of traditional family hierarchies, which is actually one of the central concerns which brought NZTT together. So, actually, this bag contains an extra pocket made of RFID blocking fabric to protect your data from prying eyes and your baby from harmful radiation.
But just double checking, I'm not getting a trophy.
Well, the medium is the massage. Or, the content is conflated with its own means of circulation.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Congratulations. Do you have anything else you would like to add?
Well, I was thinking actually, do you think that we're doing a disservice to the publications we carry by actually hiding the wonderful content inside?
That's a very, very good question. If you compare our work to those of other distributors, perhaps we are doing a little bit less to promote the content itself and focusing more upon its transit. I mean, promotion and advertising are the most direct forms of propaganda. And in that sense, our winding, circuitous routes are skeptical or hesitant to enter into the entrepreneurial model so straightforwardly. I mean, things are obviously already being sold and traded, right? So, like a physical bookstore or a library, everything is there. The fun is actually in the browsing. I think the kinds of work and ideas within the publications also deserve to be served by means other than the already existing model of capitalist accumulation. And that is not only about commodities themselves, but about spectacularization, labor, and the social ecology as well. While Display Distribute's experiments are far from being complete, and things are always in beta version, waiting for kinks to be worked out and certain things to be resolved, I do hope that it sparks enough curiosity to impel readers to continue reading.
Yeah, I would even say that the curiosity, which is what got me involved as a carrier, becomes the primary tool of propaganda, invisibly hidden by way of logistical inefficiencies to impel further questions, deconstructions, or other forms of story making. The propaganda is not one particular message, but is a tool to start deconstructing or find other spaces.
Well said, Miss PAPERBRIDGEE. This idea of logistical routes as story making is kind of like Ursula Le Guin's carrier bag theory of fiction. And we are the carriers. Despite the fact that we have had to make a lot of postal service compromises this year, I hope that light logistics can keep moving.
Speaking of COVID-induced compromises, it's not ironic that there has been such a surge of discourse on care lately.
Yes. I read something recently that talked about how care is often used as a kind of packaging to append forms of charity and humanitarian consciousness, disguising what are actually other forms of indebtedness and political motivation. Exactly. Yes, care packages drop down from the sky along with propaganda leaflets during wartime. And yeah, we're in wartime again, aren't we? Did you know that actually the UN gifted North Koreans with tote bags during the Korean War? And communists also sent cloth bags called GI care kits to frontline American troops.
So that's your explanation for my new tote bag trophy? Classic psychological warfare. We're back to brainwashing again. It happens on both sides. Remember last year during the protests? There was the 21st century version of the airdrop where protesters were using iOS airdrops or even Tinder or Pokemon Go to spread information about the movement and upcoming actions.
That's a good one. Yes, it is all about the infrastructures of information and knowledge. Maybe the attentiveness to care as never an object in and of itself, as a package around and shaping the objects, is the result of the expanded realization of structures of control and the need to find ways to dismantle them.
Yes. So let's by dismantling ourselves.
Dismantling ourselves.
Oh, one window. I need help.
Good job.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So,
Wow.
we should say that anyone can ask questions, all participants, all visitors, and also if you want to be included in the video, then just type question in the chat. Otherwise, we also have some questions in the chat.
Yes, certainly. But first of all, thank you so much, PAPERBRIDGEE and Portable, for your contribution. It was extremely entertaining. And while definitely touching upon so many important subjects, you were very true to your delivering very lightly. So yeah, most in my notes.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you so much, and also challenging this format of being on screen, and maybe should we first, there's already questions in the chat, so maybe we just start there, if that's okay.
Okay.
I will read them to you, so you have a bit of time to get seated. So Clara is asking, what are your thoughts on the non-human figure of the mule? both as animal totem and as vernacular term used to refer to clandestine distributors.
As in smuggling.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
The drug mills. Yes. I'm trying to. I think it's you could. I'm sorry. I hear an echo. So I would see it somehow in a way. You could call it lo-fi cyborgian kind of treatment in terms. I think a lot about these examples of people who smuggle things across the Hong Kong and Shenzhen border, and there's one really infamous example, I think a couple of years ago. Do you remember the guy who had something like 52 iPhones strapped to his body? Mm-hmm. And they caught him because he was walking funny because it was so heavy. And that image to me also of how it influences your gait or your entire body. I think that is also embodied in the idea of the mule, especially when, for example, drugs that are implanted inside your body. Mm-hmm. And how those things, I guess, get infused with the transit and with the courier is probably something that we can think through a lot further, I would say. But I haven't done research on that specifically. So.
And maybe a question by myself. Through your presentation, I think it has become quite clear what to understand as light logistics and low-end globalization. But since you also addressed the COVID pandemic and how it has disrupted your network, doesn't this complicate the relation between low-end and high-end? Because you're piggybacking on the high-end infrastructures, on the high-tech infrastructures, and if the disruption also disrupts your way of operating, so for example, airline travel, among others, does this lead to a reconsideration of the project, light logistics and display distribute, or is it how adaptable are you in that respect?
Actually, we were just talking about this a few days ago about what we know that this is definitely a problem that we've been facing a lot this year. And I don't say that we have, I think like everyone else who's facing crisis during this period, you're scrambling for other tactics or looking for ways that you can explore. But we react a bit slowly. So I don't say that I know exactly where we will head at this point, but it's definitely been affected. But that's natural. It's part of the transitions that we're all going through right now. And I'm not going to complain because yes, that high to low aspect of a lot of the couriers, including PAPERBRIDGEEE, are somehow related to art sphere in a certain way. That's not necessarily a focus audience of any particular reason, but it is coming out of networks that we start by reaching out, and those happen to be the people or the spheres that we are involved with. I would like it to open up in other ways. You've been talking about doing more local transport as well, right?
Yeah, and I feel like undeniably there are a lot more added inconvenience to how we can transport our packages right now, but it's also not procedure, like the whole routine is one that is very familiar, like that we're very familiar with. So maybe like the time span is extended, or there are more complications into how we can get into contact with each other. But I feel like the whole routine is pretty much the same. It's just like the little things that changes. But I feel like because we are familiar with how we can do things, we are very adaptable to it. And I think that in a way is an advantage for us.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think but I should say referring to parallel traders or smugglers or couriers as models for the strategies and the tactics that we're using are very much like coming out of the need for flexibility because they're really ground up or working in gray economies where things are not stable. They're not institutionalized. So we have to be flexible.
Yes, and there's another question in the chat by Shiloh. And she asked, can you talk more about how the unboxing and moment of display relates to being in transit? Packing up, moving, unpacking. And as a follow-up, maybe we start here.
As a follow-up, what?
Should I continue? Okay, I was worried it was too long. So as a follow-up, she asked what being the package carrier reveals about the carelessness and red tape in transit systems. In other words, are there things you notice or reveal about the way circulation network by using it in this way?
I think a lot of us, there are actually cases of people who maybe got interested in independent publications because of the project, and then they end up making publications themselves. These kind of fluidity of roles within this community we can call of independent publishing is something that's quite important. And I think maybe you could say one of the particular goals is to encourage that kind of multiplicity, so to speak. So if we're talking about opening up packages, like a courier, we just recently had a courier, Jamie Bott, who she was carrying books to China and also had to go into quarantine for a couple of weeks. And then she asked us specifically not to wrap the books, so she would read them while she's in quarantine. And that was great for us because then, it opens up the possibility that the transit becomes also the opportunity to share that knowledge, or she gets to intervene in that production process, which is what subversive workers are doing all the time anyway. That's where
water package,
like what do you call it? Surplus goods that get smuggled out of the factory. These are what those workers are doing, and she's playing that role naturally by the happenstance of her being in quarantine in China. And the second half of the question was, I'm not sure. Sorry, you might have to repeat.
I can repeat. Yes, it was long. So the follow-up was what being the package carrier reveals about the carelessness and red tape in transit systems. And in other words, are there things you notice or reveal about the circulation network by using it in this way?
I think we're deliberately trying to make it inefficient and deliberately trying to point to other details that happen along the way. I don't know if you have any stories about weird things that have happened on your routes or something, but those things are all the things that don't get recorded in a traditional logistics service, right?
Yeah. A lot of the times we wrap our books with like papers or like newsprint like papers, so they're very fragile. And if you're like meeting another carrier in a restaurant or somewhere where there'll be water, or on a rainy day, you have to be extra careful. And I'm treating this thing that I don't know what is inside even more carefully than I am with like my maybe waterproof backpack.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of funny.
Yes.
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 I think we need to wrap up,
okay.
which is very unfortunate, because I think we should continue this conversation for at least another half hour, but we need to proceed to the next panel. Thank you so much for also giving us true insight into transport, logistics, circulation as a material practice and as a collective material practice, and how is it intertwined with other material practices. And yeah, fantastic. Thanks for fantastic theater piece and dialogue. So.
I just wanted to also say thank you to Hong Kong Community Radio, who supported us in making this green screen magic possible today. So thank you, Gavin and HKCR, as well as to the conference organizers. We're really excited to be able to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you.